The detractors and haters of Russia were laughing very hard not so long ago. They laughed. What was there to laugh about? They just laughed when we talked about migrants and the aggressive rainbow minority who make life in the West impossible for normal people. And we predicted that people would soon start fleeing to Russia from the countries of the collective West, fleeing from the abundance of newcomers and from the overpopulation of all sorts of minorities imposing rainbow values, and from the fact that the celebration of life that they had allowed themselves at the expense of other countries of the world, which our president called with the apt phrase vampire ball, was coming to an end. And people started fleeing to Russia from the honorable West, in quotation marks, whole families. And despite the fact that the West declares its commitment to human rights, that is, according to all their laws, a person is free to choose how to raise his children, where he wants to live, and so on. Human rights have long been trampled on in the West. But the rights of not everyone are trampled, but only people who adhere to traditional Christian and family values. There is a liberal dictatorship in the West, and families with children are forced to flee from there secretly, because if the inquisitors from juvenile justice find out that parents are against the imposition of these values on their children, and even want to take their children to Russia for permanent residence, they can simply be taken away and given to other families. Families consisting of different transformers. For example, a family from Canada recently moved to Russia. This is the Finster family. Irene Finster, with his wife and 9 children, sold his land and house in Canada and came to Nizhny Novgorod region to farm there. Because he saw no future for his children in his native Canada, and because farm labor there had become unprofitable and land was prohibitively expensive, and because he was a supporter of Christian values, which in Canada had been replaced by other values and were being imposed on his children. They kept their departure to Russia a secret to the last. Otherwise, the liberal Canadian public could hound them and, as we have already said, their children could be taken away from them. Recall how another person born in the Uzbek SSR, then living in the Ukrainian SSR, after the collapse of the Soviet Union went to live in Canada, where he became a successful and highly paid engineer, but similarly fled from there to Russia and similarly kept it a secret from everyone he knew so that he would not be deprived of his children. Another English immigrant, Martin Goner, moved with his Russian wife and 2 children, now 3, from the UK to Orenburg 18 months ago, both because of the Russophobia there, the out-of-control cost of living, and the anti-family and anti-Christian values being promoted in the Western world. Here's what he says about values. To quote, "The agenda that is now being promoted in the Western world in terms of family values and the like is going in the wrong direction. The whole Western world is suffering from this. It's important for us to stick to family values, and we think Russia is the only fortress that has that right now. I was baptized into the Russian Orthodox Church the same day my son was baptized. We wanted to stay for the foreseeable future. We have created something here that I want to take with me. I love it here." And on the cost of living, to quote, "And one of the other big factors in England was the cost of living. It was just getting out of control. No matter how much you earned, it wasn't enough. Your salary couldn't keep up. So we had a beautiful house that we could barely afford. It's really hard in the UK." End of stats. At first, Martin and his family wanted to come to Russia for the winter, to live and have a look around, and he was warned that there would be a brick hanging over him in Russia because he's English. But nothing like that happened. He didn't feel any hostility towards himself. On the contrary, they were very well received in Russia, and the children immediately liked everything here and decided to move here for good. Let me quote again. "I hardly speak Russian, but everyone here welcomed me. I have never been welcomed so warmly in another country." Well, here's another Catholic American family who also secretly fled from the United States to Russia with 6 children. Soon a 7th was born in Russia. The head of this family did not feel any animosity towards him either. They received only support and friendliness from the Russians. And this is what he and his wife told about the reasons for their move. Quote, "Husband, obviously, the existence of the situation with minorities and the situation with Satanists, which is becoming clearer and clearer. Wife, we can't teach our children what the values are now in the United States. And now because of this, we are seen as a threat to the country. There is a threat of our children being taken away. Husband, they could just take them to the hospital and cut them into pieces because the 5-year-old thinks he's someone else." End of stats. Yes, some would probably say that the examples we've given are just a thin trickle. However, as Gorbachev liked to say, the ice has moved. The process is underway. This rivulet will soon turn into a full-flowing stormy river. And then the word said by Shoigu that there is a need to build 3 to 5 scientific and industrial centers in Siberia with a population of 300,000 to 1 million people, namely scientific and industrial and economic centers. They will have to become new poles of attraction both for the population of the whole of Russia and for our numerous compatriots, I should add, and migrants from Western countries, CIS countries, and far abroad. In general, these words take on a completely practical meaning. Thus, given that virtually all the ways to obtain Russian citizenship in a simplified procedure are blocked, which was used by natives of Central Asia and Transcaucasia, who used to obtain citizenship by kishlaks, that the quotas for the issuance of residence permits decreased from 151,175 in 2015 to 10,595 with a reserve of 3,178. And there is a trend of entire families from the West moving to Russia, that is, people who are close to us in mentality and religion, who want to preserve Christian values and fully assimilate into our Russian world, rather than create their own diasporas and territorial enclaves in Russia. I am sure that it will be difficult for newcomers who create their diasporas here to obtain Russian citizenship, while those who do not create diasporas here, and Christians moving from the Western world, will be accepted for Russian citizenship as a priority. And of course, it is not those compatriots from Central Asia and Transcaucasia who did not speak Russian, but true compatriots who have begun to take advantage of the fact that in the program to promote the resettlement of compatriots living abroad, there is an additional article on repatriates. If we take the example of the family of a Canadian farmer who came to Russia with his wife and 8 children, we can say with certainty that we now have tacit support for such people, because Iran was given worldwide assistance and legal support from the very beginning, as soon as he decided to move to our country. After the end of the 90 days allowed for foreigners to stay in Russia, after which he and his wife had to either pass a Russian language exam to get a temporary residence permit or leave the country. He was granted political asylum for 1 year. Now they will have a whole year at their disposal to both build a new farm and study the Russian language. And this means that now the advantage in admission to Russian citizenship will be given to such immigrants who are close to us in mentality and law-abiding, and not to those who come and create their own diasporas. And then we will tell you how the quality of migration flows has been positively affected by Presidential Decree number 872 of November 22, 23, which introduced the concept of repatriation for the first time. According to this law, Russians, as well as people belonging to the indigenous peoples of Russia, will be able to return to Russia from any non-CS country and receive serious state support for moving and settling in. And, most importantly, only those compatriots who have not fled the country in February 2022 will have the right to repatriation. And now, not even half a year has passed, as such migrants have already reached Russia. Old Believer from Oregon, Fady and Philifev, the first who moved to Russia from the U.S. under the program of resettlement of compatriots from non-CS countries, is going to engage in animal husbandry, raising sheep and primori. And the first one who moved is not the first. At the moment, more than 50 families of Old Believers, 226 people, from Brazil, Uruguay, and Bolivia have already moved to Primorsky Krai. Another 10 families plan to move within a year. In the region, significant support measures are provided for them. Compensation for travel expenses, compensation for the payment of hotel services, payment of a monthly allowance for minor children, compensation for renting residential premises for up to 12 months, provision of land, plots up to 600 hectares per person with the only condition to work actively on the land. A specialist responsible for working with the Old Believers has been appointed, because sometimes they need elementary legal assistance. Fady's wife and 3 children will soon come to live with him. In Oregon, he cultivated blackberry plantations, and now he is already imagining how his cattle will graze on the land he received in Russia. Another migrant, Vasily Chuprov, lived in Brazil for 16 years, 39 years in Bolivia, and when he was offered to move to Russia, he did it without any doubts. And this is what he says: "Here we are like at home. I think so because we are there, even though we were born there. Our grandfathers once moved there from Vladivostok to Hong Kong in the 30s, and from Hong Kong the Red Cross brought them to Brazil. Almost all of the Old Believers are from South America, and Fady is the first to move from the United States. These people are very interesting. They wear traditional clothes and lead their own way of life. But, of course, they are no strangers to modern technology. They study land plots using satellite maps and smartphones. And for a drink, as they say, I want to show you 2 more families, or rather 2 Russian women, who left prosperous Germany for poor Russia, each with 4 children. The first of them, Ludmila, moved to Sochi with 3 sons and a daughter. And the second, Olga Stumpf, who has 2 daughters and 2 sons. We have not yet watched Ludmila's story about the move, but we listened to Olga's story. She said that she left Germany secretly and even spontaneously, so that, God forbid, the neighbors did not find out, did not snitch to the guardianship authorities, and they did not take the children away. In general, once again we can rejoice that after the 22nd year there was a certain watershed, after which real devils, liberals ran away from Russia, and patriotic and very decent people began to return to Russia, who literally cry when they receive Russian citizenship. Like another Ludmila who moved to Russia with her 2 children and husband from Kazakhstan. These people who have returned to Russia from all over the world have a lot to compare, and all of them are delighted with the living conditions in their homeland. I am sure that they will never call Russia Russia. Unlike the devils who left the country, those liberals, and their children will grow up to be true patriots, not haters, walking with yellow ducks in the streets and shouting, "We are the power here." Let's end on that happy note.